What is going on, everyone? Phil here for KO Gaming, and welcome to the Hateful Truth video game review series, where I give you maximum truth and minimum bullshit regarding the latest video game releases. Today is a bittersweet day for me, because today is the day that I get to review one of my favorite games of the past several years, but at the same time, it is the end of a franchise, and in a lot of ways, an end of an era. Ladies and gentlemen, today I will be reviewing Uncharted 4, A Thief's End for the PlayStation 4. When Uncharted broke into the gaming scene in 2007, it surprised a lot of people because the game developer Naughty Dog hadn't necessarily been known for adult-oriented or serious games in the past. But this game combined amazing graphical achievements on the PlayStation 3 with run-and-gun third-person gameplay, with cover-based mechanics, really unique platforming, adventure, treasure hunting, and puzzle-solving mechanics, as well as some really good writing, voice acting, a great story with a great cast, and the adventure aspects of a series such as Indiana Jones. It just worked. And over the years, we've seen two amazing sequels on the PlayStation 3 that each advanced the series in their own way, whether it was tweaks and improvements to the gameplay mechanics, the addition of giant set pieces and really epic things happening. We know that when we play Uncharted, we need to expect greatness. Uncharted 4, in this regard, is no exception, and in my opinion, was a great way to send off this series, although, admittedly, it's bittersweet. This is a series that's now been around for almost 10 years, spanned an entire console generation, and to finally see it conclude, although it's amazing, also is obviously going to leave a gap in our gaming hearts because we've really learned to know and grow with this series. Now, at first glance, one may say, man, I don't know about Uncharted 4 because it's taken 4 years for this game to come out. Uncharted 3 came out in late 2011. This game came out in the first half of 2016. What gives and what took so long? Well, the bottom line is Naughty Dog was also up to other stuff, including their new franchise, The Last of Us, which in its own right was a huge hit. And so now that they've come full circle and come back to the conclusion of Uncharted, I have to say this up front. If anything, Uncharted 4, A Thief's End is a prime example of when you have a AAA game developer given the amount of time and resources that they need to fully develop a game until they feel that it is completed, that they can show that gaming in this day and age can be a masterpiece. Because there's a lot of these game developers out there today that either get rushed or the game has to be out within a certain period of time, and when they come out, they feel like that. They feel like they're unfinished, they're glitchy, they're buggy, they have issues, they feel like there's entire chunks of the game chopped out. Either that or they're incredibly too short. Uncharted 4 has none of these problems. It feels like a polished, smooth, organic ordeal, an adventure that you really have to experience, whether you're a longtime fan of the series or whether this is the only Uncharted you've ever played because it's finally on the PlayStation 4. Now is the time to jump in and experience gaming greatness, and I certainly mean that. In fact, before I even get into the specifics of my review, I'm going to tell you this. I think the graphics of Uncharted 4 are the best console graphics I have ever seen. Now, last year, for the Order 1886, I said the same thing. I fully feel now that Uncharted 4 has surpassed what the Order 1886 has done on the PlayStation 4. Oh, by the way, the game is a good lengthy 13 to 15 hours long in campaign. It also has an amazing 60 frames per second running multiplayer mode. The game didn't skimp to put out great graphics like the Order did. This is a full-fledged, fully loaded $60 game that warrants that price tag, and you don't get ripped off because they rushed through it or they cut corners. Uncharted 4 is the real effing deal. So now to get into the specifics. First of all, the story of Uncharted 4 is probably the best of all of the games, and I really mean that because for the first time ever I felt that the story was paced properly. You open up with some backstory, then it's mixed in with some tutorials about the gameplay mechanics of platforming. Later on they throw in some tutorials with the gunplay, but then there's some cutscenes to explain more backstory. And for the first time ever, you actually get to explore Nathan Drake's house and get an insight into his life outside of treasure hunting, which is a pretty sweet thing. There's a bunch of cool Easter eggs thrown into the game to add to the quality of the story. And the bottom line is, by the time that you're done with this 13 to 15 hour saga, you really feel like they've done a great job closing the story of Uncharted. You're going to see returning characters. Pretty much all of your favorites are going to make some kind of an appearance in one way or another, with, yes, your favorite returning voice actors, including Emily Rose as Elena and Nolan North as the protagonist Nathan Drake. In addition, there's a whole slew of new characters. I won't spoil too much, but I will say that one of them is voiced by Troy Baker, so if you're a Troy Baker fan, you're definitely going to love this game because he does a great job as the main role, playing off of Nathan as the protagonist. Another thing they did a great job with in the game was making the chapters kind of feel equivalent. And what I mean by that is, in previous Uncharted games, sometimes you'd have a chapter that only lasted maybe a few minutes, then another chapter that lasted an hour. And although the chapters certainly aren't equivalent in length in Uncharted 4, they're relatively on average about the same, lasting anywhere from about 20 to 40 minutes each, with maybe one or two chapters dragging on a little longer than that. The game has 23 chapters total plus an epilogue, so you're going to get a lot of gaming out of the campaign of the game. They've also added an incredible amount of collectibles to the game. There's so many hidden throughout the world of Uncharted 4. I missed probably about half of them on my first run through the game. I'm sure if you're a completionist, this is probably going to be your wet dream, because you're going to have so much to do and look and explore into all the optional areas, every nook and cranny. Having great graphical detail and trying to find every single collectible and or log could definitely stack up to be a great gameplay experience. In addition, one of the major additions and improvements to the gameplay engine of Uncharted 4, open world roaming. Now, it's not to say as extensive as a game such as Metal Gear Solid 5 by any means, but in 3 or 4 stages of the game, you're left to explore a wide open area, whether it's in a Jeep where you can drive around and try to find ways around ramps and use the winch to pull yourself up rivers and such, and maybe jump over a bridge that's collapsed. Sometimes you'll simply just be on foot and exploring around this wide open area for secrets and a way to get from point A to point B. They've also done a great job in Uncharted 4 of creating optional paths to get from point A to point B. It should be pointed out that in previous Uncharted games, a lot of the times it was incredibly linear, where you had to go this one certain way in order to progress the game. In Uncharted 4, they at least try to make it feel more organic, with certain platforms actually having optional ways to get to them, and I actually liked that about the game, that you could maybe go one way or a different way and not have to go down this one certain route where every handhold was a special color and it was pretty obvious what you were supposed to do. Not so much so in that game. They really made it feel a lot more natural, and that is a great improvement in my opinion. Another major addition is the hook, which you will be throwing and swinging from tons of times in Uncharted 4. Although there have been some segments in previous games using these kind of mechanics, in Uncharted 4 it becomes a main staple of the gameplay, where you get this kind of hook that you can throw out to grapple off of areas almost near the beginning of the game, and it comes into play dozens and dozens of times in key scenes where you need to jump across gaps. It's really cool, it's free form, it's on the fly. I never had a problem getting it to work, so they did a great job implementing that and making it feel like there was a lot more range of motion in the platforming. Puzzles make a return to Uncharted 4, and for those who've played the series for a long time, you're going to feel very familiar ground here. They're not too difficult to figure out as long as you put a little bit of thought into it, and every once in a while, Nate will actually add a note to his notepad that you need to pull out and kind of reference in order to solve a puzzle. There's maybe 5 or 6 major ones of these in the game, none of which are cripplingly challenging, but they are pretty fun to have in the game as well. In addition, the gunplay is pretty much on par with the previous Uncharted games. They removed those really annoying shield enemies from previous Uncharteds that were really a pain in the ass to kill. Instead, now, it's more about strategy. How do I approach this group of enemies? More times than not, you're going to be seeing a group of enemies before they see you. So it's really up to you now to try to use stealth, kind of crawling through tall grass or hanging off of ledges to either try to sneak attack them from a certain angle, or maybe in a few cases sneak completely by an entire group of enemies. Although more often than not, I found that the easiest form of action was to try to just attack them from the right point, pick up the right ammo and weapons that they drop, and just wail into them. In fact, I actually found it very difficult to completely skip a group of enemies in the game, only doing it maybe once or twice, but I think that was actually intentional. So there's a lot to be positive about in Uncharted 4. The best console graphics I've ever seen, new open world roaming, improved grappling, improved platforming, optional ways to go through levels rather than it just being one linear path like it used to always be, a really decent lengthy campaign lasting between 13 to 15 hours with great voice acting, story work, and characters, awesome art design. We'll be going through all kinds of different dungeons, solving puzzles. It's exactly what you would expect, and it's the penultimate version of Uncharted. Hands down, I have to tell you, I feel that Uncharted 4 is the best game in the franchise history, including the Golden's game, whatever it was called, on the PlayStation Vita, which I also played. This is by far the best Uncharted out of all of them, and I was very pleased with that because that's a perfect way to end the series. As close to perfect as Uncharted 4 is, I still felt that there was some room for minor improvement, albeit probably these are some of the most nitpicky things I've ever said negatively in a Hateful Truth review, but they do need to be stated. Number 1, in some areas of the game, as you're trying to figure out a stealthy way to go about getting past enemies, it almost seems like the game is trying to push you towards being completely stealthy a la Metal Gear Solid. Can I actually sneak past all of these waves of enemies without them ever seeing me and get from point A to point B without disturbing them? Unfortunately, what I found is that 9 times out of 10, with maybe 2 exceptions during the game where I was successful, even when I tried so hard to sneak by the enemies and not trigger them, somehow magically they would know where I am, turn around and see me even when I'm trying to hide out or run to the next patch of tall grass, alerting everyone at once, which of course makes no sense because they're not psychically connected. Every enemy would then bead their guns on me and it would be a bloody nightmare. I really wish that maybe they had leaned a little bit more towards the total stealth aspect of the game, or at least made it a little bit easier, because I actually found it easier to approach the enemies just from a certain angle where maybe I had access to better weapons or whatever that were already laid out, and kill them off one by one, which is more of the traditional waves of enemies in Uncharted gameplay. I don't know why that was so much easier than maybe doing a stealth run at it. So that's definitely a gripe of mine. I really thought that the stealth aspect of the game could have been slightly improved. My only other major gripe also has to do with the run and gun gameplay. Yes, it's cover based, yes, it's very similar to the previous Uncharted's, but 2 things really piss me off. Number 1, every enemy in the game has a perfect grenade throw. Still, in Uncharted 4, for 4 straight games, Naughty Dog hasn't figured out it's complete and utter bullshit that your enemies can always throw a perfectly cocked, perfectly aimed grenade at you no matter where you are on the map. They never miss, always forcing you to move out of cover. It's very annoying. At least every once in a while, give me a grenade that at least bounce back and hit them in the face. No, never. Always the psychic grenade tosses, and that's really annoying. Number 2, there are 1 or 2 places in the game where they absolutely go too far when it comes to the waves of enemies, especially near the end of the game where obviously they're saying, well, this is our last chance to throw everything possible at you. They start throwing wave after wave after wave, and the thing that really annoyed me is that the checkpoint system, although it is good, sometimes is inconsistent. There was one particular wave of enemies that I was trying to sneak by, but I just kept alerting them by accident. So I ran by them and ran almost to the very end of the section only to die. Next thing you know, they put me back at the beginning of the section as if I had not done any of it and there were no checkpoints. That obviously angered me, but this time around, when I played through it, I died around about the same point, and now mysteriously there was a checkpoint halfway through it. So why didn't that trigger the first time that I had played it? I really don't understand it. In addition, sometimes the waves of enemies will not trigger properly. For example, near the end of the game, there's one particular gauntlet of enemies where 2 heavy gunners are coming at me, but then all of a sudden, like 5 or 6 normal enemies come out behind the gunners as well, making it nearly impossible to win. So I died 3 or 4 times. Next thing you know, all of a sudden, only the 2 heavy gunners came out, while all the other enemies hung back. I killed the 2 heavy gunners, walked forward, then the next 6 enemies triggered, leaving me to believe that's how it was supposed to be to begin with, but the waves of enemies were not triggering properly. So these are obviously minor nitpicks, but still, this is room for improvement. The game was very close to being the penultimate Uncharted game for me, but I do have to say there were a few things that could have been tweaked a bit more. Before I move on to the multiplayer, I just want to call this out. There is one action sequence in Uncharted 4 that completely blew me away. I'm going to go as far to say it's the best designed, the best action sequence I've ever played in a video game to this point in my life. I could not believe how seamlessly fun and exciting and just freaking amazing it was, the fact that the graphics didn't chop up, the fact that everything was able to be done during this sequence flawlessly with no problems. I couldn't believe it. And I have to say this, with a sequence like this being possible on the PlayStation 4, I have to point a strong critical finger at the game devs who are talking with Sony, and Sony developing this new PlayStation Neo. Oh, we need a tougher or a more powerful console in order to pull off these next-gen graphics and to do a full frame rate game at 1080p. We need the best hardware possible, and PlayStation 4 doesn't have it. When I played through Uncharted 4 and I'm able to pull off this segment of the game, bullshit. I call utter fucking bullshit on those game devs. If Naughty Dog can do it, you can do it too. Shame on you for saying it's the console and the hardware's lack of capabilities that aren't allowing you to pull off some of these amazing things like I did in Uncharted 4. It's a cop-out. In my opinion, it's the game developers and the publishers not having enough time to work on and develop and finish these sequences. You need the talent, you need the resources, and you need the time in order to complete an amazing game like Uncharted 4, and most of these game studios aren't being given that chance. It has nothing to do with the hardware. We don't need a PS Neo, we need a whole new fucking system for game design and game development that allows people to make magnificent games like this one. I'm so blown away by this segment. I strongly recommend, even if you've never played an Uncharted game, you play this one just to experience this one thing. Holy shit. In addition to the mind-blowingly awesome campaign of Uncharted 4, you've also got multiplayer. Now, is it anything to write home about? Is it anything that's going to blow your socks off? Probably not. You've got standard team deathmatch, you've got capturing territories a la Domination of all the other shooter co-op games, and you've also got the returning plunder mode where each team is trying to capture an idol and get it back to their base, which is very similar to Capture the Flag. The one addition to the multiplayer this time around is not only the grappling hook, because that was added into the campaign of the game, but also the ability to summon special things. For example, you can summon a little idol that will spit out fireballs and hit your opponents if you earn enough in-game currency through getting kills and completing objectives. You can also summon a minion who will come out, whether you can have the heavy from the game or the hunter class, which runs and grabs an opponent and leaves them wide open for you to shoot them and kill them. It's a unique take on the third-person shooter gameplay that I've never seen before, having these minions being summoned. I really enjoyed it, and although again you will probably play it and get hooked on it for a bit, do I really foresee anyone playing the hardcore, this multiplayer over and over and over week after week? Probably not. After a couple weeks, maybe you'll get burnt out a little bit on it, but it is there. It's fun. It's awesome. And in a day and age when so many game studios are releasing games that only have multiplayer for $60, the fact that Uncharted 4 has an insanely great campaign plus a really featured, full, and fun multiplayer mode, it's basically two games in one. Again, I don't know how much more I can emphasize how much bang for your buck you get with this game. And so, it finally comes down to the score. As if I haven't told you enough how much I love this game. Probably one of the best games I've experienced in the last 10 years. An amazing gameplay experience that even people who aren't longtime fans of the franchise should play. But it's not perfect, with one or two little gripes, nitpicks, and opportunities for improvement that I feel were missed out on, that certainly don't negate the positive experience of the game in any real way, but do need to be called out. My review score for Uncharted 4: A Thief's End is 9.75 out of 10. An insanely strong contender for Game of the Year. I love this game. Please check it out. Don't think that this is just hype talking. I came into this game with a very open mind and have to say, undoubtedly, it's the best one in the series. It's the best action platformer that I've played in my lifetime so far. You're gonna love this game. You're gonna love the presentation on the PlayStation 4. Even though it's a console exclusive, don't let that hinder you from playing it if you can. Check it out. It's an awesome experience, a perfect way to send off the series. Thank you, Naughty Dog, for doing the right thing and taking the time you needed to make this masterpiece. And that is it for the review of Uncharted 4: A Thief's End. I sure hope that you enjoyed the video, everyone, and if you did, please consider giving it a like here on YouTube, as well as checking the video description for links to both my long campaign playthrough over on DSP Gaming, as well as some multiplayer gameplay that I checked out on launch night. In addition, you can also check out my Amazon Associate link, as well as my Patreon at patreon.com/DarksidePhil. Thanks a lot for watching, everyone. I hope you'll check out my reviews in the future. This is Phil signing off. See you then.